Well, here we are at the end of another series on the Famicom. The Hokuto no Ken games have not had a great showing on the system. The first game was one of the worst action games ever made, impenetrable with terrible controls. The second game was also an extremely bad side-scrolling beat-em-up, but not as bad as the first game, and it somehow got a US release. The third game switched gears and was an RPG, a virtually unplayable, hideous to look at, badly designed RPG. Hokuto no Ken 4 is a sequel to that game. In fact, it's by the same developer that made the first, third, and fourth games in the series. So you know we're in for quality this time. Hokuto no Ken is a wildly popular comic and cartoon telling the story of Kenshiro, a martial artist that wanders a post-apocalyptic Earth. If you know anything about the series, it's that when Kenshiro punches someone, they're already dead. This RPG has a rather long subtitle, Shichise Hakenden Hokuto Shinken no Kanate, which can roughly mean Hakenden of the 7 stars beyond the Hokuto Shinken. Hakenden being a reference to a Japanese novel about 8 warriors, but slammed into the fact that there's only 7 stars in the Little Dipper, the symbol of Hokuto Shinken, the martial arts style that makes people explode. The subtitle implies something important about this story. For the first time ever in Hokuto no Ken media, Kenshiro is not the main character. Instead, the game takes place an indeterminate amount of time after the events of the series. Kenshiro and his allies are all dead, and you're playing a young man whose village was attacked by bandits. By visiting the graves of the various Hokuto Shinken masters, you encounter their spirits and learn their techniques. The RPG system is very similar to the previous game, which was, of course, very similar to Dragon Quest. While exploring, you hit A to bring up a menu where you could choose to talk to someone, search the area, use an item or martial arts technique. The healing arts can only be used outside of battle, but I never got any techniques while I was playing. You start with a couple minor pieces of armor, and just enough money to buy the rest of the things you need to equip yourself. And then you step out of town, and the first encounter you have will probably kill you. When you die, you're sent back to the last town you visited, and it takes half your money. This house where you revive is also where you go to save your game, and there are 3 battery save slots here. So here's the thing about Hokuto no Ken 4. The early grind is brutal. Apparently the grindiness doesn't let up for the whole game, but at the beginning, you have 40 hit points, and one of the common encounters one step outside of town are 2 enemies that will do around 15 points of damage to you per round. It takes you 3 rounds to knock one of them out, so you can see where that's going. In combat you can fight, use an item, use a martial arts technique, or run away, and running away is rarely successful. The encounter rate is also super high. It's rare for you to be able to take more than 3 or 4 steps before having another fight. And so in this initial grind, you're going to die a lot. And that's going to prevent you from earning money to buy the better equipment that's available. And making matters worse, the experience you get in these fights is really poor, and the requirements to level up are really high. I set aside about an hour of time to record these games, and in my 1 hour and 6 minutes of playing Hokuto no Ken 4, I managed to reach level 3. And that was with grinding just about continuously. Once I reached level 3, it took me multiple attempts to walk to the next town, just because I kept getting attacked by enemies who would knock off most of my health. And then once you were too far away from town and had an encounter like that, you couldn't get back without dying. At the second town, you encounter a grave of one of these masters, but they require that you take some actions before they'll appear. And so I went into the first dungeon, which looks only marginally better than the Atari 2600 Adventure. You'll see treasure chests in here, but infamously in this game, treasure chests don't have anything. So you just ignore everything in the dungeons and try to reach the boss. And obviously I wasn't anywhere near leveled up enough to do anything there, and I didn't have any martial arts abilities. So all I could do after going through the dungeon was die. There's more problems with this game than just these. The text is infamously riddled with typos, and at one point after a dramatic scene, you defeat a boss and get a line that became a bit of a meme. To translate the line, it is, "You receive 37 points of sadness." It's this kind of thing that has led to Hokuto no Ken 4 being heavily mocked by Japanese players. This is one of the more infamously bad Famicom RPGs. But even though this game was awful, it's not the end of the road for Kenshiro. There are a lot of Hokuto no Ken games out there, though as a broad rule of thumb, most of them are pretty bad. This isn't even the end of this particular series of Hokuto no Ken games. Shoei and Toei Animation are going to release 3 more in this series for the Super Famicom. The next one's another very bad RPG, and then the final 2 are very bad fighting games. While I don't want to draw too many conclusions given my limited time with it, what time I did spend with Hokuto no Ken 4 was pretty miserable. It's slow, clunky, brings nothing new to the table. This is an RPG that would have been barely acceptable in 1988. In 1991, it both looks horribly outdated, and everybody else is doing something better. It's not quite as bad as the previous game, but it's not much of an improvement.